Have you ever heard that the USA is a classless society? Then why has there been class struggle in its history? Hey, Cypher here. I was once a believer in the whole idea that America is a classless society. You know, the whole thing about America having no class structure, that there isn't a ruling elite or a bourgeoisie or a proletariat. But that's all changed as I've studied more and more of US history. I'm no Howard Zinn now, but class struggle has existed within the US. Some of you may not know the importance of this subject. You know, why even bother arguing that the US actually had class struggle in its history? Well, it has everything to do with Marxism. You see, according to Marx, there are distinct classes in industrialized societies. There are the owners of the industry, who can amass enough capital to benefit themselves, and these capitalists make up the bourgeoisie, or the middle class, and they own the current paradigm. And then there are the people who work for the bourgeoisie. These people are exploited by capitalists in order to make money. They are the proletariat, or the labor class. Marx believed that in this power scheme was the ruin of the bourgeoisie. Eventually, the exploitation would be too much, and the proletariat would rise and create a socialist government instead. Anytime the proletariat fights against the bourgeois powers, that's class struggle. You might have heard of it as class conflict or warfare as well. Although conservative pundits use the class warfare analogy a little bit differently, but in reality, their terminology is based on Marxism. Now, I don't need to say that a lot of people have believed in Marxism, including a huge amount of historians. And so part of the Marxist historians' project is to go and find where class struggle has existed in history. Understanding and representing it is helpful to further their cause. Now, I'm no Marxist, but regardless of belief in Marxism, class struggle has undeniably existed in America. Numerous books have been published on this particular subject, most notably Strike by Jeremy Brecher and The People's History from Howard Zinn. But there's been stuff on all kinds of subjects, and much of it influenced by Marxism. All of them point to class struggle in America in numerous ways. Let's look at some specific examples. If you haven't yet, watch my video on violence in America. These subjects overlap in a lot of ways. Class-based unions and their struggles have always been good examples. America has not only had its fair share of union-based struggles and conflicts, but the US has actually been pretty innovative in that regard. The Knights of Labor was one such innovation. It tried to organize all people who produced any kind of good under one union. Its membership counted 800,000 in 1886, but there was a massive railroad strike that year which broke the union. Then there was the Industrial Workers of the World, or the IWW, often called the Wobblies. They also had the idea of one big union, but they were also very radical, calling themselves anarcho-syndicalists. Both the Knights of Labor and the Wobblies were severely suppressed by the US government. And also, the Socialist and Communist parties made huge impacts on unionism in the US, at least until the McCarthy era. The FBI was actually created to basically fight Bolshevism in America, as in anarchists, communists, and their infiltration into labor unions such as the IWW. Hell, the entire year of 1919, also known as the First Red Scare, was just full of this stuff. Pre-World War II, all unionist rhetoric was filled with class identification, and we historians have to accept that they count as a class. You see, when people identified as a labor class, as part of a labor union, then that shows that there was a proletariat because they self-identified as such. But then the second Red Scare came along after World War II, and this whole ideology of labor class versus middle class was removed. Blacklists in the Taft-Hartley Act co-opted unions into expelling communists, and any kind of socialists who might be affiliated with communists. And as part of that whole thing, that decreased the whole class rhetoric. And then everybody just wanted to be counted as the middle class. You see, you won't have many Americans who won't identify themselves as being part of the middle class. Even if they are below the poverty line, there's numerous people who will self-identify as middle class. So class consciousness basically doesn't exist anymore. At least not in the Marxist way. But class struggle still exists. I mean, there was the Occupy movement a little while ago, and that whole term 99% is based on old class conflict principles, much of which is Marxist or at least socialist in origin. But unfortunately, that whole thing is actually meant to draw up the idea of the bourgeoisie, the middle class, that the 99% is the middle class and the 1% are the super ultra rich who are the elite. Whereas real class struggle was the other way around, where the labor class was fighting against the middle class, the bourgeoisie. So this whole ideology of middle class values that permeates our political rhetoric to this day is actually a tactic to avoid the whole idea of class struggle. You see, if nobody identifies as being part of the proletariat, then you just don't have a proletariat. So we may very well live in a classless society now, but that's only because we actively renounce Marxism. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and check out some previous episodes while you're at it. I'll see you next time.